Breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. The new college football AP Top 25 poll is out after we capped off Week 12 of the season. Here's a look at your new top 10 teams. No huge change at the top. Worth mentioning, though, Oregon remains #1 and has officially clinched a spot in the Big Ten title game that is on CBS this year. Oregon got the close win to Wisconsin yesterday. Most notable, though, you'll see BYU undefeated no more. They fall out of the top 10 after their loss to unranked Kansas. Georgia is back in the top 10 after their win over Tennessee, while the Vols fall the most this week, but still claim that 10th spot. A look now at 11 through 20. No major changes other than, as we mentioned, BYU falling. They claim the 14th spot. You'll see Boise State there at 12. They're ahead of both Colorado and BYU, would be the top teams in the Big 12 right now. South Carolina makes its way into the top 20 as they claimed a 34-30 win against Missouri. And a look at the rest of the teams that do round out the new AP Top 25 poll. You'll notice Kansas State, LSU, Louisville, and Missouri all out of the top 25 rankings. Washington State still in it at 25. We're going to dive into all of this and so much more as we welcome you into our CBS Sports HQ studios. I am Jordan Giorgio alongside Douzable and Brad Crawford joining us from afar. Let's go ahead and start with BYU falling, okay? Were we giving BYU, you guys, a little too much credit? That SMU win that they had seems like forever ago. That Kansas State win is starting to look worse and worse. How are we processing at this moment this BYU team?
Yeah, I think it's hard to win week in and week out. And yes, Jordan, they were muddling around the line of potentially losing the last couple of weeks. You talk about that Utah game the week before. If not for I'm going to go ahead and say it, a bad call, they probably lose that game versus Utah as well. So this is a team that you have to give them credit for winning every week because, Brad and Jordan, we know this. It's hard to win games week in and week out. It's hard to go undefeated no matter who you're playing, especially when you're playing guys in your conference. But they, again, were flirting with losing the last couple of weeks. You see it right there, the Utah game, the UCF game, that Oklahoma State game. Like, they were on the brink of losing all of those games, and it finally came and bit them. But a lot of people were surprised that it came and bit them at home versus a Kansas team that essentially hasn't went out to become bowl eligible. So I'm not going to say that we weren't giving them their just due. I think anytime you're able to win every single game, some respect has to be paid. Just like Indiana, people are saying, well, who have they played? Who have they played? Who's on their schedule? It's hard to win week in and week out in college football season. Yes, there is something to be said on who you actually schedule, non-conference, and how your conference is, but it's hard to win week in and week out. And again, it finally bit the BYU Cougars.
We said it for weeks that BYU, just like Miami, has played with fire within its conference season. And, you know, 3 close wins in the final seconds. Last week was able to beat Utah on that late field goal. Finally, it came back to haunt BYU, and they lost to a Kansas team that we said last week is starting to streak now with Jalen Daniels at quarterback. The good news for BYU is this, though. 7 spots fallen in the AP Top 25. I do not think the selection committee, the playoffs, is going to drop them 7 spots. I still think BYU will be inside the top 10, might be number 10, but BYU still in good position if the Cougars win out and win the Big 12.
You agree with that?
No way, Brad. I mean, you got to think this is a Kansas team with a losing record. They lost this game at home. I think the committee will consider, like you talked about, even though they were winning games, they were playing with fire these last couple of weeks, right? Again, if a call doesn't go their way on a pivotal 4th down versus Utah, they lose that game last week. Now, potentially, we're looking at 2 losses for BYU. But it went the other way. They were able to kick that field goal late and win that game. But when you lose to a team that doesn't even have a winning record, like, there has to be some payment for that, right? It's not like they lost to a team that's ranked and they barely lost. Just like we saw, and we'll probably talk about this later, Tennessee losing to Georgia. Like, they probably won't fall out of the top 12 because that was a close game at the end. Yes, you know, Nico fumbles the ball late in the 4th quarter. The game was essentially already over. But this, Brad, was a team they lost to in Kansas that doesn't have a winning record. So, again, people had already kind of scoffed at their schedule or lack thereof when it comes to playing a competitive schedule because the Big 12 has had an up and down year in regards to there's really no true alpha in the Big 12. And then, again, it's the SMU game is a big win for them, but it was so early in the season when Kevin Jennings essentially wasn't even the starting quarterback at the time. So I think the committee will fault them for this loss against Kansas at home, losing in the way that they did.
Well, maybe not a winning record, but have won 4 in a row. They're kind of breaking hearts left and right. Yeah. And, you know, they'll see Kansas I'm talking about here. We'll see Colorado next week. Man, and the Buffaloes better be careful because Kansas still has something to play for, and that's bowl eligibility. Correct. So we will see Tuesday. Brad, if you're correct, or maybe if you're correct, Lige, let's move on here. You alluded to it, the big game in the SEC yesterday. It was Tennessee and Georgia out in Athens. The Dogs, you know, we saw them take down #1 Texas earlier in the season. They now beat Tennessee. Are you sold that Georgia right now has the best resume in the SEC right now?
When you talk about the teams they've played, yes, because they've had like the hardest schedule, but I'm not sold on Georgia at all. It's because they have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde at quarterback, right? When you talk about Carson Beck, like, yes, he looked really good yesterday versus Tennessee, but let's not forget, let's go back to the Ole Miss game. Looked abysmal in that game. Let's go back to the first half versus Bama. Looked really bad that game and then had some big throws late, but then ended up having that costly turnover at the end of the game. So the thing is, what Carson Beck are we going to get for the rest of the season when you talk about this Georgia Bulldog team? Now, again, you look at the resume. The win at Texas was massive. The win versus Tennessee was massive. But they also played 2 other top teams, and they lost those games. The Ole Miss was a convincing loss, right? And the Alabama game looked like it was going to be a convincing loss, and then Carson Beck went on this crazy streak and got them back in the game. And ultimately, you know, Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe decided to put that game to bed. But what Georgia team are we going to get, Jordan? Now, we know their defense is going to show up week in and week out, but I don't trust the quarterback right now. Yeah,
Brad, are you on the same page with Lige here? Are you not sold that the turnover issues aren't going to be a problem from here on out for Carson Beck and company?
If Georgia had a strong running game and the offensive line was playing better than it is right now, I wouldn't be worried about Carson Beck. However, Georgia at times is one-dimensional, and you can only ask that defense of Kirby Smart's to do so much. Played well enough in the second half last night to beat Tennessee. I think right now, Jordan, you're looking at 2 fan bases, Georgia and Tennessee. Tennessee fans, I think, should be a little bit worried because that's probably going to be a 10-2 team. But will the committee take a 5th SEC team, or is an 11-1 Indiana and 11-1 Penn State going to get that bid, and then you have a 4-4 situation? So Tennessee had a chance last night to really punch its ticket, I think, in my opinion, to the playoff. But, man, they really struggled offensively. And Georgia, however, now has a couple elite wins. And I think Georgia, as long as they went out and beat Georgia Tech here in a couple weeks, they're going to be in.
Can I tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a 5th SEC team in there, though. We'll wait and see. But that's a great point, Brad. All right, let's get to the ACC here. Clemson got a huge win over Pitt. If you look at their remaining games left, Brad, they play Citadel and South Carolina. Is there a path for Clemson to stay alive here?
Clemson does not control its own destiny in this playoff picture. I think if they finish 9-3, even with 2 good wins, blowing out Citadel and beating a pretty good South Carolina team, I think Clemson's a top 20 team. They have to have Miami lose another game. Miami's going to be a double-digit favorite the next 2 weeks as well. So right now you have 3 teams still kind of competing for those 2 spots in the ACC, but you see it right there. I mean, Miami has a pretty much cakewalk unless Syracuse and Kyle Ford are able to win that game inside the Carrier Dome. I really think we're going to see SMU, Miami square off in Charlotte here in a couple weeks. And I think I've been saying it for a month now. The ACC is going to be a 1-bid playoff league, and the winner of that SMU-Miami game here in a few weeks is going to the playoff.
Yeah, Brad, I agree with you. I think when Miami ended up losing that game 2 weeks ago, that's what literally put the nail in the coffin for the ACC and potentially having 2 teams. Clemson doesn't control their own destiny, and I'll take it a step further. I don't think they're going to win that South Carolina game. I mean, I don't think there's a hotter team in football right now than South Carolina. And we're talking about teams that could potentially get in at the back. And a lot of people are saying South Carolina, right? If they finish their business, right, they have an outside chance to potentially get in, which is crazy to think about, Brad, right? A 3-loss SEC team potentially getting into the playoffs. I'm looking forward to Miami and SMU in that conference championship game. I think not enough people are talking enough about SMU. They are one of the most complete teams in all of college football. And yes, I know they had a really close game versus Boston College, but you know this, Brad and Jordan, when you have a quarterback change, sometimes you get a bump of energy, and that's what happened with Boston College. But when they needed Kevin Jennings in that offense to make plays at the end, when they needed that defense to come away with a crucial sack, fourth down, backed up with Boston College driving the football, they were able to do that. So when you talk about a complete team, offense and defense and special teams, SMU is one of those top teams. I think they need to stop being disrespected. They are going to be a sleeper when it comes down the stretch and potentially getting into the college football playoffs.
All right, we're just getting started here with the college football playoff talk. Much more from us when we return, but a reminder, you can get more college football talk in Week 13 previews on the Cover 3 podcast. The guys already have Week 12 instant reactions to this past weekend. All you got to do is scan the QR code on your screen and watch and listen wherever you get your podcasts.